justice, temperance, wisdom, courage. Applying ancient philosophy to modern times, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Greetings, my name is Steve Carefit, and this is the Sunday Stoic. The Stoics lived in a region that had a polytheistic view of the world. There were many gods and goddesses, but the Stoics actually stood apart from this view. While they recognized many of these gods and goddesses, they seemed to think they were all manifestations of the one universal God, the god that they called Zeus, or sometimes you can think of nature as God. Of course, this is just what I've heard others pick up on and what I've picked up on in my Stoic readings. We can't go back in time and question Epictetus on his belief, but we can look at what they wrote. So today's episode will be on the Stoic view of God, and let's hear from some of the Stoics and what they had to say about it. Seneca, On Benefits, Book 4. Therefore, most ungrateful of mortals, it is in vain that you declare yourself indebted not to God but to nature, because there can be no God without nature, nor any nature without God. They are both the same thing, differing only in their functions. Natural Questions by Seneca. Here at last, the soul comes to learn what it has long sought. It begins to know God. But what is God? The universal intelligence. What is God, did I say? All that you see and all that you cannot see. The Thoughts of Marcus Aurelius, Book 4, number 40. Constantly regard the universe as one living being, having one substance and one soul, and observe how all things have reference to one perception, the perception of this one living being, and how all things act with one movement, and how all things are the cooperating causes of all things which exist. Observe, too, the continuous spinning of the thread and the context of the web. The Thoughts of Marcus Aurelius, Book 7, number 9. All things are implicated with one another, and the bond is holy, for there is hardly anything unconnected with any other thing. For things have been coordained, and they combine to form the same universe. For there is one universe made up of all things, and one God who pervades all things, and one substance, and one law. Okay, so what can we do with this information? In the first reading, Seneca reminds us that nature and God are essentially the same thing to a Stoic. The stuff around us and the organizing force that puts it all together. So matter and the organizing force, whatever that may be, that drives the universe. In the second reading, Seneca again mentions that God is the organizing force that permeates the universe, and therefore is the universal intelligence, if you will, this idea of reason. And I think it's Epictetus says we all share in that reason. The reason of God is also passed on to humanity. In the next reading, the third reading, Marcus Aurelius tells us that the universe is one being permeated by Zeus, who's in all things, and that everything is interconnected. He re-emphasizes this then in the last reading, that all things are interconnected to each other, and that's what we might think of as fate, cause and effect. So everything in the Stoic universe has a cause. And so when something happens to you today, it's because someone else made a different decision that led to a decision that led to the traffic jam you're stuck in, which is why it's so important for you to understand that you have to live according to nature, and nature is interconnected, and things will happen that will inconvenience you, and those are things out of your power that you must not get upset by. So, just a reminder, I'm not an expert on Stoicism. I'm a guy that is studying it along with you. As Seneca might say, I'm a patient in the bed next to you in the hospital. I'm not the doctor. I'm just talking to you about what has worked for me and what I've figured out and what I've picked up from others. So I've been working my way through the book Stoic Serenity, a practical course for finding inner peace by Keith Seton. And there was a chapter that I just read on the Stoic view of God and fate and things like that. And I highly recommend you check out this book. I thought it might make an interesting show to just do a quick discussion about it. And of course, this will in no way reflect, a thorough understanding of the Stoic view of deity. But the Stoics were basically pantheists, so God is in all things. And I think they did kind of mention a lot of times, you'll hear them mention other gods and goddesses, but those were basically extensions of the one mega god, if you will, Zeus. They were little extensions of Zeus, basically. And our souls are little pieces of this soul. So Seddon puts it this way: the Stoics believed our bodies had a soul, and that soul was made of matter. So they didn't believe in anything, I guess you could say, supernatural, if you will. The soul is composed of some kind of matter that permeates our bodies, and likewise, God is the spirit that permeates the universe. So God is basically the soul of the universe. And we're little pieces of that soul, of that universal intelligence. And therefore, it's our job to be as good a people as we can to make sure we don't, to make sure we live up to the idea that we are a little piece of God. We can perfect that little piece of the universe that we carry within us. And when we die, we return that little piece of the universe back to the universal whole. It's kind of a poetic way to view things. You don't have to believe it as a modern Stoic, but I thought it would be interesting to look at how the ancients sort of viewed this natural idea. But what's cool is when you start to understand this, and I'm not quite there yet, you can start to put it together with the other teachings of Stoicism, like why you shouldn't overreact when something bad happens. Well, you're part of the interconnected whole, and you're trying to perfect this little piece of soul that you carry around with you, so when it goes back to the universe is a little better off for it. Another thing I find interesting is occasional discussions on how, in some ways, you can become like a god. So your goal is to be like Zeus, the perfect sage. And you can think about, what would God be like, and how can I be like that? And that is the Stoic way of worshiping God. You don't go to church, you try to live like God, which would mean not getting upset by things, being perfectly happy with your own reason, perfecting your reason as much as possible, so on and so forth. And the Stoics even go so far to say, in some ways you can surpass God, and they don't really mean that in a cocky way. What they mean is, Zeus doesn't get angry when he gets cut off in traffic. He doesn't experience this stuff. So if you can maintain the tranquility of Zeus while at the same time having the crap you have to put up with on Earth take place, that's pretty amazing. So check out some of these readings. I'll post the links to where I found some of these readings in the show notes. Meanwhile, make sure you email the show, sundaystoic@gmail.com. Let me know how you're doing. And check out the show on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, The Sunday Stoic. You can find it on there and like it. I'm on Twitter as well and a few other platforms, but I do post new shows on there. I post cool sayings I find from time to time on there. So check me out online and email me, sundaystoic@gmail.com. If you recall, Stoicism is divided up into three major topics. Ethics, which is what we tend to focus on, how to live a good life, how to be an excellent human being. Also, they studied physics, which was the natural world. And they also studied logic, which was to train your brain not to fall into logical fallacies, which would then lead you to practice physics and ethics incorrectly. So I thought at the end of the episodes from now on, I'd like to try to do a little bit of discussion of logic or of physics to add those components into the show. So for today, we'll learn a little bit of logic. We'll learn to watch out for a common logical fallacy called post hoc ergo propter hoc. And that's the idea that just because A occurred after B, that one caused the other. Okay? So I took an herbal medicine and then my cold went away. This is a really common one, for example. I see this in my grandma, for example. She takes an herbal medicine and a certain symptom goes away. Just because two things occurred does not mean that one caused the other. So we have to be skeptical about claims like this and look for more evidence than two things happening. If you look at the Flying Spaghetti Monster website, for example, they have a graph that shows number of pirates on one axis and global temperatures on the other, and then you could infer that pirates have something to do with global warming, right, with climate change. So you have to watch out for those kind of fallacies. You can see them occur all the time in politics, and especially in medicine and things like this where people are gullible, they want to feel better, so they reach out for anything they can. And sometimes you take a pill and you feel better a few days later, but you might have felt better anyway without the help of the pill. Alright, so that's post hoc ergo propter hoc. So just because one thing follows another does not mean that one thing caused the other. Have a great week. Carpe diem.